Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Around the Lens, the weekly visual journalism roundtable podcast and hosted by myself, David J. Murphy, and my co-host Zach Roberts. This week, episode 17 is being recorded on March 21st, 2016. I am your host, as I mentioned before, David J. Murphy. I'm a visual journalist based out of Charleston, South Carolina.
And I am your co-host, Zach D. Roberts. I'm a photojournalist who's worked in New York and Alaska. I've worked previously for BBC, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, but most recently I've been working on a documentary called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy.
I like it.
Awesome.
Look forward to it. When can we see that documentary, Zach?
Coming out this summer, in hopefully in theaters near you.
Oh my gosh! All right, well, looking
Or at
forward
least
to
in
that.
major cities across the country, probably not near you. I don't know.
New York and Los Angeles. All right. Great. Well, our panelist this week, and we only have one this week, is Jose Alvarado. Jose, why don't you tell the audience about yourself?
Hey, I was born and raised in New York's Westchester County. I've always had a curiosity with the relationship between people and their surroundings. I'm now located and based in Queens, New York, where I focus on documentary photography, documenting small groups of people, and street photography.
Cool, cool. So how long have you been doing that for?
I've been doing it for, I think, seriously now, like 5 years. I've been
Nice.
doing a few projects on, one of my latest projects is the Jibaros, which is like the indigenous people of Puerto Rico, which are the farmers and the fruit pickers, and went down to Puerto Rico in search of my family heritage. I'm Puerto Rican, so I went down there looking for the old place that I would hang out and like all the old mountains, and went around, took some cool photos there, and made a bit of a story. And then another one I just finished doing was a project on the pier fishermen that prowl for fish in Coney Island,
Oh,
and I took a few pictures of them, and it's a pretty interesting little 1,300 square foot bit of pier. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm working on.
So are you originally from Puerto Rico, or were you born in the States?
I was born in the States. My parents are both originally from Puerto Rico.
Okay, cool. So you're first generation American. Nice.
That's correct. Yeah.
I'm actually first generation American myself. My mom was from Poland, so I can feel the love there. How often do you go back to Puerto Rico?
I do pretty often. The last time I was there was last year. I went to this the San Sebastian festival they have every time in January. It's like this really cool street fair. It's like the weekend long. It's in Old San Juan. Everyone's dancing, partying. You go into people's houses, you eat food with them. It's a really good time. And it's a really good sense of like the culture that the island brings, dancing and.
Nice. Nice. I actually went to Puerto Rico for a month when I was in the Marine Corps. I was stationed out in Vieques. Are you familiar with Vieques?
Yeah. It's right next to one of the most beautiful beaches there, Culebra.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually.
I went up there. This was, I think, like 6 months, or it was very shortly after 9/11. So they sent me down there, and if you don't know about Vieques, it was actually used for many years as I would say, aiming location for naval vessels. So for target practice, naval vessels would shoot duds, or non-explosive rounds at Vieques to obviously test their aiming. Well, when I was there, and probably for years before, but the villagers were protesting the military's presence on the island because they said that the rounds they were shooting at the beach or on the land were kicking up dust, which was floating through the air and giving everybody cancer. At least that's what they were saying. So it was interesting being down there because I saw the protests in person, and this being right after 9/11, pretty much anybody who was a protester was potentially considered a terrorist because obviously if they tried to like enter the base or stuff like that. So it was just interesting to be there at the time. Since then, I know, or at least I've heard, that the island has been given back to the residents of Puerto Rico, although it is a refuge, a wildlife refuge, or something like that. Like you can't build property on it, which I know probably they would love to have done because the beaches there were beautiful. But yes, Vieques, wonderful place. Spent a month there. But yeah, it was interesting to see in Puerto Rico all the hills and all the houses built on stilts in the hills.
Yeah.
That was interesting because you probably get a lot of flooding over there, I presume. Couple.
Yeah, it's here and there. It's just I remember like when I was younger, I didn't really understand it, and like a lot of my relatives would have those homes on the stilts, and like their backyards would be like under their main house, and there was really no walls. So you'd be little kids playing soccer on like edges of literally of a cliff. And to us, like little kids, you don't really realize the danger of things like that. And as you get older, you're kind of like, what the heck was I doing? That's crazy, you know?
Yeah,
But
my
it's
mom just let me play in a pile of glass and metal shards, and I was like, it was fun at the time. I didn't think anything of it, but I look back on it now, I'm like, oh, I'm just kidding. All right, it's a little known fact. I actually used a question you asked in a previous show as a topic, so I was happy to have you on. I found you via Reddit. Reddit is an awesome resource. If you don't use it, you should. Great communities on there talking about photojournalism and filmmaking and stuff like that. I check it multiple times a day just because I'm kind of addicted to it. But glad to have you on the show. So let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot of topics to talk about this week. The first one actually deals with something we don't talk a lot about, but really, visual journalism. When I designed the show, relates, not only to photojournalism, but also documentary filmmaking. I love documentaries. I think that they have definitely a power just as much as good photojournalism does. So the first story we deal with relates to the Blackfish documentary and essentially what it did to change SeaWorld's sort of breeding program in regard to orcas. So what I want to know from you guys, obviously, Zach, you've done documentaries yourselves. What do you think of the power of documentaries? Do you think that this Blackfish documentary did have an impact on the SeaWorld making the decision? Do you think documentaries themselves have impact and making change? And kind of what have your been experience with documentaries?
Well, I mean, first, I think that not only if you haven't seen Blackfish, recommend it. I think it's one of the best documentaries, not even in considering influence or anything like that, but it's one of the best documentaries made probably in the past couple years, especially at establishing its case. A lot of documentaries kind of like enter the world and then kind of like walk around the topic for a little bit and then try to make a conclusion. But this was like, if this was presented to a jury, they would have found SeaWorld guilty. I mean, like it was so conclusive and so well made. And the big thing too is that it was so well made and so conclusive that CNN bought it and aired it and has aired it quite a bit. So I mean, it wasn't just this independent documentary that kind of, even like a Michael Moore documentary or something like that. I mean, like those type of films you just never see on air. There's almost no place on television that you can watch like real documentaries outside of maybe Al Jazeera. Well, for the next couple months, Al Jazeera. But even then, they're kind of usually in-house documentaries. But this one really conclusively made a difference, and because I mean I've been talking about this fight, like unfortunately back when I was a PETA member, PETA, I always forget, but we've been talking about like this idea for a very long time in kind of the environmental movement. Back to Free Willy. I mean, which kind of started it, but now this has actually kind of made the case of like that it was really terrible what they were doing.
Right.
But there's been quite a few films that most films try to make the idea at least to start the conversation. I'm working on 2 different documentaries right now. One on election fraud or election theft, and kind of corporate crime and money and influence in politics, and then a separate film on the National Rifle Association. And both of them, the best we can hope. I don't hope, like say with the film with NRA. It's not about gun. It's not anti-gun. It's a film basically discussing the NRA and kind of history. And I'm not hoping to have the NRA dissolve necessarily, but I want the conversation to be had that maybe if you care about gun rights, the NRA isn't necessarily the best organization for you. And I come from a family who has a long history in gun rights movements. I mean, my uncle started the Second Amendment Foundation, one of the largest gun rights groups in the country. So I know it pretty well, and I see what they've done. So I mean, I wish I like to see that. It's like we talked to Eros Hoagland, and he's previously he's basically left still photography to an extent and working in documentary film. I see a lot of people that I know, including myself as well, have moved from still photography and still photojournalism primarily to this idea of like either feature length or even short length documentary film, because unfortunately it's a lot of times where the money is. So
And as we were talking about previously, you get a DSLR that can shoot video.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not
Yeah,
documentary? Isn't that right,
yeah, totally. I
Jose?
mean, like the way it is now, the way the cameras are going, and they're getting so much more affordable. I mean, I think it almost gives everyone the opportunity to make a difference and have their voices heard. That sounds kind of cliche to say, but it really does.
Yeah.
And the topics you were just talking about, I'm excited to I'm very excited to see them. I want to see them. It'd be great. Um, I mean, speaking about the documentary Blackfish, I think the biggest thing that they did that was it made it relatable to people as if these animals are actually humans. The way they actually have families, they're taken away from their families and bred and put in
Yeah.
these small tanks that aren't meant to really facilitate them, and that really hits the people, and it takes people to make the difference. And I think even as the article was saying that, like, at the end, the kids are what really stop the whole thing from happening, because if kids aren't going to bring their parents these things. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a great move by SeaWorld to stop doing it, and I wish it would happen a little bit sooner. I wish it didn't happen at all, but I mean, it's always good to change.
Yeah. And one thing I love about the conversation that this started is because it's also started a conversation about zoos and about how whether or not this is the best way to showcase animals that you may not see and kind of save species, or whether keeping them locked up in a pen for people's viewing pleasure is an idea, and it's something that I mean, argument on zoos can be versus like wildlife sanctuaries or other kind of type of experiences that people might be able to interact to some level with other creatures other than the deer that wander in the backyard or the random bird that flies by sort of thing. Because for most of us, I mean, you live in Queens, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
there's not. I mean, I live up in the country, and even then, like, I get excited if I see a fox. I mean, like we don't see a lot of a lot of creatures anymore,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I mean, I used to live in up Alaska, and they're just everywhere. Like you like go down the highway, and it's a nature preserve. But in the lower 48, we've kind of done a conclusive job on wiping out species diversity, and so that's one thing that it's amazing the kind of reach of this film. I mean, like, I think especially per dollar, whether how much it made and how much people spent on it to see it or whatever. Michael Moore may have the 2 or 3 of the highest grossing documentaries of all time, but this film, I can't think of another film, and this is something I write reviews about, I talk about all the time. I don't know of another film that has had this sort of effect.
Well, the only other documentary
Yeah.
I can think of that has had an impact, or at least a wide-reaching sort of, people knew about it, was, Super Size Me.
Yeah.
That's the only other film I can think of off the top of my head. That, and maybe one of the Michael Moore documentaries, but I can't remember which. Maybe the 9/11 one. But I think Super Size Me, at least when I remember it at the time, it was definitely like a big story, and it personally influenced my food eating habits. Like, I avoided McDonald's and tried to avoid fast food as much as I could after I saw that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I still do. I mean, I go through, if God forbid, because I do a lot of, I'm constantly driving to different places, so unfortunately a lot of times fast food is just the only thing I can possibly eat. And, you get literally I use phrases from that documentary, like in the same way that I would from a fictional film, where it's just like, oh my God, I have to mix sweats. And I have to mix shakes after you have like a ton of sugar and you have the fat and the salt and everything like that. And it's just the fact that it was able to, a lot like Blackfish and in some of the Michael Moore films, it built words that people didn't know before and built them completely into the lexicon of the way we talk about food. And I don't think that McDonald's will ever, and hasn't. I mean, they've started shutting down operations, and for the first time they've ever started closing stores. Which is completely
I
insane.
saw that. Yeah.
Well, that probably has to do more with profitability than of necessarily,
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that, I mean,
It's in their
in the
heart, right?
same time, at the same time you had that film, you had that film come out, and then you had the spread of the, God, what do they call it? Not slow fast food or whatever it is, kind of like
slow food.
Chipotle,
Oh, yeah.
and other places like that. So you kind of, that was the spark that got the conversation that moved people over to thinking. Well, first off, I mean, I wouldn't blame Morgan for Morgan Spurlock for convincing people that half-pound burritos are a health food, which is for some reason.
Well, that's Chipotle's thing. It's like the biggest trick
Yeah.
they've been able to convince the public of is that this burrito that everybody thinks is healthy is actually like 1,000-calorie like super bomb.
It's
of
actually
fat.
worse than a Big Mac a lot.
Yeah,
It's just like,
yeah.
But it's healthy because it's organic.
But that's a big thing. I mean, that's something that he touched upon, and if you look at his other work as well, he did a great film, which I wish had a hell of a lot more influence, about the advertising industry. And oh my God, I can't remember the name of the film of it. Name of it. It had a pomegranate bottle, and he sold advertising sponsors to fund the film. It's a fantastic discussion on how kind of film works and everything works. But he also kind of made the people really starting to think about the farm to table, the fact that his girlfriend was vegetarian, and he was able to kind of build that into a personal relationship that, no, he was not going to turn vegetarian, but maybe there's a way that we can kind of blend these, conversations. And yeah, I mean, that's essentially, you look at Chipotle where, it's organic, it's locally, usually they quote unquote locally sourced at some of these, more fast, slow food type places. Usually local means like, within the 3-state range, not like
Right.
local.
Like,
But
yeah, no.
But yeah. No.
You
Those
were
are other-
mentioning earlier, Zach, about the lack of documentaries, but I think, on TV, regular TV, you're not going to find very many, or at least not that often.
Yeah.
But on Netflix is the place to go for documentaries. I was just looking up, like, where can I watch Backfish? Apparently, it's streaming on Netflix right now, so
Yeah.
I'm probably going to go watch it on Netflix. But yeah, I love the Netflix and documentaries. Jose, do you use the Netflix at all?
I love the Netflix, man. I use it a lot for like just like looking up like random movies, like indie films, just like look up different lighting scenarios. And it's like weird because I don't really use much of strobes in my type of work. I still like use it as like a way of getting my eye ready to see that kind of similar look, and I kind of like prepare myself for it. And also the fact that I'm a sucker for good stories.
Yeah.
But
I think Netflix is doing great things with documentaries, and so is HBO. Actually, Zach, didn't you mention the other day that something was on HBO Go that you were excited about?
Was that Police Academy 1 through 6?
Yeah. That
classic
documentaries about the police force.
Yeah.
I pitch this constantly. The way I discovered who a person who I guess consider a friend now, Eros Hoagland. He was in the first episode on HBO of a documentary series called Witness, which if you're a photojournalist or a photographer or a person even interested and you have access to HBO Go or HBO Now, you gotta look that up. I think it might even be on Amazon Prime. I'm not sure, but it might be. But I highly recommend that. That's a documentary series about photojournalists, and it is done really, really cool too. I mean, that's it. Witness. It's 5. I think it's like 4 or 5 episodes. One's with Eros. They do Juarez. They do. Oh my God, I'm blanking now. I think one in Brazil. One in Libya, and they talk about how Tim Harrington. They talked to a couple friends with Tim Harrington and Chris Hondros, and how that both of them lost their lives, and they're just really, really shockingly well done. Oh, there's one in Africa where they actually follow. I feel bad because I forget her name. They follow a pregnant photojournalist around, which, my God, I was just talking before the show about how I need to get in shape before the summer kind of political season heats up, and now I'm remembering this woman who was like 8 months pregnant and in like I think she was in the Congo and she's following around like warlords, completely insane, and she's just talking about, it's like, yeah, I'm not nervous. I mean, this is part of the job. I mean, women work when they're pregnant all the time, and it's like, oh my God. I'm like, not only, I mean, put everything else aside, I'm like, if I was carrying that much percentage percentage weight. I don't think I could move around. And she's like just carrying. She's got like her 2 cameras, her Canons, I think she was shooting with, and like running around. And I'm like, yeah. Often, usually, women can do it better than men.
Yeah, right. Well, speaking of working while pregnant, I don't know if anybody's been watching The Walking Dead, but
I have not.
Was that?
I have not caught up, but you can speak about it. So.
Well, I won't mention anything, but let's just say there's some people who do some things. I'm like, whoa, that's not probably something you should do while you're pregnant. But anyways, let's get away from that. Spoilers. Jose, do you have any documentaries that have impacted you that you would recommend?
I think a good one. I was gonna say like the Super Size is a good one, or the Inconvenient Truth, the Al Gore one, talking about the global warming was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
I saw it when I was a little bit younger, but it was it did get people talking about the whole global warming thing and whatnot.
That's a film that if you rewatch, it's amazing because now it's knowledge that is not only we've all like the normal person has surpassed the level of knowledge that was given out in that film. Like most people know 350, they know the numbers, they know kind of like what the problems are. At least people that kind of live in that world a little bit. At least people who believe that climate change is real, who live in reality. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's not everybody. But it's amazing how shockingly boring that film is, though. Now, like then, I remember seeing it in theaters and being like, wow, and now it's like, it's a PowerPoint presentation.
It's just
because the way that in 15 years documentaries have evolved so amazingly quick from basically there's a film that I think it just won the Academy Award about the drug war. It's actually on Netflix right now, which I'm actually going on Netflix and trying to remember the name. It is shot. When I first saw the trailer for it, we'll put the link in there somewhere. It looks exactly like a full-length feature film with a like $150 million budget, and it's shot. It's a documentary. It's all really happening, and they're following around this group of people who are fighting basically essentially Mexican militias fighting against the drug cartels. It's completely insane.
Yeah, that sounds pretty intense. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that goes to show you, camera technology being what it is.
Yeah.
And throw that into a documentary environment, and you just get such more richer, more impactful documentaries. And speaking of movies that could also be considered documentaries, I would have to say Catfish is a good example of that. If anybody's ever seen that, it's like a movie, but it's a documentary, or so they say. Could it be staged? Who knows? Let's move on to our next topic of the evening. We'll have documentary chat. We'll have that as a subject next time. We talked about social media in previous episodes. We've talked about of course Instagram and its importance. We've talked about the Around the Lens MySpace page that Zach is going to set up for us someday.
Bringing it
Zach,
back.
we got to get on this MySpace thing.
I know.
We are being left behind in the MySpace.
We'll be on the forefront of the past. I'm not quite sure how this works.
Zach, we got to be ahead of the year 2002. I need my 8 faves, whatever. Anyways,
my top 10 friend.
That's right. Jose, you're on there. You're going to be top 10. So, we've talked about social media a bit, but I want to get more into it, specifically, in the age of visual journalism, how social media has really both not only impacted our career field, but taken it over in a sense, so much so that if you really, want to be recognized, especially as an up-and-comer, or just somebody who's trying to get attention, and leverage, you have to be on social media. So there's an article Huffington Post published where this guy talks about all the social media platforms, Google+, Facebook, Reddit, even, and talking about leveraging those platforms. So, how are we leveraging those platforms? How should others leverage them? What does the future hold beyond this? And, kind of looking back, in terms of yesteryear, how was this done before the age of social media? How did you get out there? How did you make a name for yourself? Any thoughts? Let's start with you, Jose. You're I'd say the youngest of us, right? You're probably what, like in your 20s, mid 20s, late
Yeah,
30s,
yeah, mid
early
20s,
30s. So I mean, you're
early
probably
50s.
more, you're more of the generation that grew up, obviously with social media being the norm versus probably Zach and I, who grew up where social media took its foothold. What are your thoughts on social media? How have you leveraged yourself as a photojournalist in this age?
I think it's. I mean, I personally love social media. My favorite social media of choice is Instagram, mainly because you're able to publish stories via your, on your phone, and it can reach a lot of people really quick. And if you're not doing it that way, you can also post them on Facebook, and you can get some like hits that way as well. And also Reddit, which Reddit brings a lot of traffic to my stories on my website, which I've noticed. Put them on a specific subject or subreddit on Reddit, and people give you feedback. They help you out. They help you make you a better make you a better artist and make you a better storyteller. Um, so I think social media it's almost like it's like a double-edged sword. It's like you can use it, but at the same time it can hurt you because then you get so addicted to like just like trying to get likes and stuff like that, what people tend to do sometimes. But at the same time, it's like for some publications that don't have the space for your specific story to be put into, you can show people it on your own means. So in a sense, everyone is almost like their own like news source, which I like it.
How do you use, or how do you, I would say leverage Instagram specifically? Like, how are you communicating with your followers? How does that go down? Or are you just
And for
pushing
instance,
stuff out there?
all right, yeah. So for Instagram, for instance, like the whole hashtag the whole hashtag thing, where you can hashtag with a specific hashtag, and people will search that hashtag and they'll reach it and be like, "Those images are associated to that," and like some certain pages will be like hashtag it with this specific hashtag, black and white hashtag, and you'll put down your photo and that will just show up. And reason I like the whole like social media with the mobile thing, it allows you to for certain, like for instance, like the Sony and the Fuji system, which is already Wi-Fi enabled, you're able to take photos on your camera, immediately shoot it right to your phone, and from there you can blast it onto your social media almost instantly. Whereas times where you take photos, bring it back, edit them, look at them, and you can shoot them out, it almost makes it almost simultaneously. It's like you're getting a high quality image with your camera, shooting it down, posting it up. People like it. People are getting a story up to date as it's happening, which I kind of think is the way news is going now. You got to have news happening 1, 2, 3, because it's happening and people aren't seeing it. Then it's not news as much anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So most of the stuff, would you say that you post on Instagram is stuff you shot with a professional camera that you which then transferred to your phone?
Yeah, for the most part, it's I've been my new process has been using the whole like mirrorless system. There's just smaller. There's like almost because I've been always using like a Leica, so at least like the whole like small rugged camera. So these little smaller mirrorless cameras are the same thing. They're light. They throw them in my side bag. I shoot, transfer it right to my phone. I can post it up. The stories don't necessarily be super interesting to people, but it's still getting my work out there that people can see it as I'm shooting it. And
I, I've toyed around a little bit with this, with the Panasonic GH4 that I have, because I can wirelessly connect that to my phone, and then of course, see the images or download them to my phone. But I mean, what do you do with stuff you shoot on cameras that don't have the transfer capability? I mean, you have to download them to your computer
yeah,
and then you transfer them to your phone, or how do you get them on Instagram that way?
so if for instance, if I'm doing it like with my 5D Mark II, um, I'll I'll shoot them, and I usually use my 5D Mark II for more like really serious, intimate projects I'm doing where I really need to know I have like better dynamic range with my like stuff. So I'll use that. I'll bring it home, dump them on the computer, put them up on Capture One or something. Just make selects. Don't really tweak too much. I'm just like not big on tweaking stuff. It's the way it looks, kind of the way it is. And then I'll process them, send them to by email in a format that's small enough that won't take a lot of room by email that my phone can take, and then down to my photos library, and then yeah, just there you go.
Okay,
There's two different things I use. There's a website called Latergram,
Later grams. Okay.
It's .me. The last two letters are .me. You get 29, I think 30, basically one free upload a day, or you have to pay. The problem is the pay cost is like it's like $30 a month, and you only get like 100 uploads a month. So it's not like I don't know. I'm well hoping that they're going to come out with cheaper plans because it's something I would pay for. And the big thing is you can schedule. For me, that's one of the big things is that like I'll cover an event and then schedule out for the next 4 days because I usually don't have really good cell phone reception where I live, so I don't usually take a lot of photos, even though like I don't upload a lot of photos. But and then there's a program, at least for Apple, that I know of called I think it's called Grambler, which it's an actual app for the computer that you can actually upload files. Supposedly you can schedule, so I haven't had a massive amount of luck with it, so I've been just sticking with the later gram. But
that's crucial though, like the whole like scheduling of images. That's another thing that I think a lot of people are starting to grasp now. Like if you schedule your image at the proper time, you'll get more of an audience.
Yeah. Well, have you ever used Hootsuite? Because Hootsuite also allows you to schedule.
Can you it integrates with now we're really getting into the social media weeds here.
I don't know if it integrates with Instagram, but you can check that out yourself. I mean, let me know. I've used it with Facebook and Twitter, and you can schedule stuff. Obviously, you can schedule stuff on Facebook too. Jose, have you ever used Android or iPhone?
I'm an iPhone guy.
Okay, because I know iPhone does have USB adapters for Lightning port, and you can actually plug in card readers to some of those. I used to actually do that way back in the day when the original iPad came out. I would have a USB adapter, and then I would plug in a card reader, and actually could download photographs from my 5D Mark II and upload them to my blog. So you might want to look into that as another alternative to your process. And I know they just announced the iPhone 5 or the iPhone SE, because now small is the new big. And I know the iPad Pro, smaller version, whatever, it can use these USB adapters. I think they have it for the iPhone. I don't know. I mean, I have a micro USB thing that I use, or I can use for my phone, my Note 4. Which allows me to plug directly into the micro USB port at the bottom and actually download imagery from my my camera. But that's an option.
Definitely, I'll try all this stuff. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, C.S. Muncie, a contributor of ours, actually for Photo Brigade a while back, wrote a review of one of the new. I don't know if it's an actual official little dongle or whatever for the iPhone that has a direct. I believe it's a direct SD card import. Right there, which obviously if you had the Mark II, then that's problematic. But for any other cameras, like the other things, it'll work well. I just wish, unfortunately, I'm shooting. It's frustrating. I'm shooting my Nikon D600s, and the Wi-Fi dongle, which unfortunately is a separate thing. It's terrible. Like it's just so terribly slow, and like basically I have to like decide. The only way it really works well is if I decide beforehand to shoot JPEGs, and like medium quality JPEGs maybe. But anytime I try to shoot RAW and then move it over to my phone, it's yeah. Then the Nikon app again. Please, Nikon, if you're listening, work on your app for God's sakes. I've seen Canon's app; it's fantastic. It just works. Nikon, please work on it. Anyway.
Canon for life.
Canon, maybe. Yeah.
Except unless you're Panasonic, then Panasonic for life.
Or until we all move over to Sony because they're ISO and they're basically beating everybody else at everything right now. So yeah. And
Sony for life.
Video. Sony for life.
I say whoever will sponsor me for life.
If you give me free camera gear, I'll use it for life.
I will. Whoever wants to sponsor Around the Lens podcast for life.
There we go.
Brought to you by no one, because we have no sponsor. Jose, so how has your Instagram experience been? Have you gotten a lot of followers? Is that have you gotten?
I started this new process. Like I've started doing this like because before I am like in the social media era, social media generation, I never put too much, thought into it until like the Instagram until like maybe like 6 months ago. That's when I really started seeing a jump and people coming and looking at my stuff. I think right now like probably like 900 followers, which went from 400 in like the last few months, which is pretty, I guess, kind of good. But they're all quality followers, not those crazy spam followers that people get.
You don't pay for followers.
Absolutely
Like
not. It's
I do.
organic. It's
Yeah, you don't
organic,
pay.
baby. Yeah. No, but I
Good,
think it's
man.
a learning process. Yeah, I think for everybody.
So, I mean, has social media generated work for you, or has it just mostly been an outlet for you to kind of promote your stuff?
It's it's no, it hasn't really been too much work. It's more of an outlet to like show what I'm doing, and people do appreciate it. It's from what I've gotten lots of feedback on it. But I think as I start getting more, if I don't want to put too much of my almost like you say good stuff on my Instagram just yet. It's more like I want to publish that and put that on my actual website. I usually use my Instagram as like my as you would say the B-roll of what I would do as a story. It's like kind of like the side stuff. I would show
So, I
my
mean, as a working photojournalist or whatnot, visual journalist, like, how do you make money? And is it something you're going to tie into social media? I mean, or do you see just social media as a way to promote yourself to get in front of other potential customers that'll pay you money to
Exactly.
do work?
Exactly. I think it's like just like your free advertising in a sense, and basically a free visual resume of what you can do and what you've done and what you've seen.
So would you say then that like Instagram would be the portfolio of the modern era?
I think for now, but I mean that can change. Like Facebook was the portfolio of like what 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and that constantly changes. Like Facebook was great on the computer, just like Google was, but like once you go to the phone, like a lot of those programs have a trouble like moving over to like the different format, which I think Instagram, since it was born on the phone, is able to like just rake that all in, rake all those like those viewers. And I think it's like as like the next next medium comes out for viewing, then the next app will come out, the next type of outlet, and maybe Instagram won't follow as much. That can change it all the time. The technology is always going. Just like you have Sony A7s that can see in the dark basically now. So.
Well, I mean, the big update on Instagram, and it'll be interesting whether it works or what, is that they're getting rid of the timeline. They're getting rid of the order of just the way you currently look at Instagram. It's just how it came across your feed at the time, and now it's going to be curated to some level, basically like Facebook is, and that. I kind of find that interesting because I mean again that'll throw off the whole way that a lot of people might do it, whether it be scheduling and how important it is that you post at 9 a.m. or you do something, which for news oriented stuff that always kind of sucks because a lot of times you have breaking news at 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that, or some protest happens or some event happens and it happens at lunch or something like that. When people aren't maybe not looking at it, or when people are, or whatever. But now, if an algorithm means something, I mean, I don't know what. It'll be interesting how it actually works, because I mean, Facebook has there's ways to cheat it and there's way to whatever, and I mean, I feel like it reads as a way that all these companies are finally at the point where their investors are saying, okay, so this is adorable. You guys have 300 million users. Now, how do we get money from them? Because this is why we gave you $1 billion. You know what I mean? Like Twitter has 375 million users, and their investors are freaking out right now, supposedly, because they're not growing. I think they're not growing. They're supposed to be growing like 25 million a quarter, and so now they're freaking out, and people are like worried about Twitter. Never mind the fact that Twitter, according to NPR's Marketplace, could literally spend the money that they spent last year and continue going until I think it was 2052 before they would run out of money. So I mean, like these companies have so much money banked that they don't know what to do with them. But at the other hand, it's not money that they've made, it's not money they've created, it's money that venture capitalists dropped in.
I don't think that's a Freudian slip.
Vulture capitalists, you'll be able to find out about in The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, a film that I'm working on. I'll start advertising that constantly, working at Just scroll across the street, across the bottom of the screen. Yeah, no, not subliminally. No, screw that. There'll be pauses.
What's the difference between whatever the opposite of subliminal is, you'll do that.
It'll be bliminal.
Liminal.
Or liminal? I don't know. It'll be really, really freaking obvious. That's what it'll be.
Yeah, it's we were talking networks are changing. I mean, Twitter is thinking about going towards these longer posts where you could post more than 140 characters. Yeah. I heard about this Instagram thing. Really click into my head, in terms of what it meant, because I don't know why you would not want to go with the timeline. But it's just this constant evolution. Where do you see 5-10 years from now? Where do you think? What do you think will be it? Do you think we'll be doing social media still? How do you think social media will look in 5-10 years?
I mean, what's the newest thing right now is the iWatch. It might be going smaller than that. It might be going you might be just doing little blurbs on your voice. To me, it could be anything. It could be just recording where you're at, and that could be a thing. I think that the still image and the moving image are obviously going to be in the forefront of the social media because everyone wants to know what everyone's doing at all times, and they want to be aware of what's going on, which is the beautiful thing about this time now. It's people say the news is the newspaper is going down, but I think it's the newspaper is going to be relevant for even more. You know what I mean?
Well, as I've kind of said in previous episodes, we're going to go back in time. So I'm actually going to record the show onto 8-track cassette and send it out with a slide deck in a carousel. And that's how you're going to enjoy the show. You're going to watch slides while audio plays.
The video version will be only available exclusively on video disc, which maybe David remembers video disc. I don't know.
Of course. Laserdisc.
These massive, bigger than record size discs that you would slide into a thing. I'm barely cognizant of that. I had Beta. Was my favorite format. It was so much better than VHS. But anyway.
Length went out over.
It's the old person segment of the podcast. But no, it'll be
my game. Well, let me tell you about Laserdisc. It's funny.
I don't know. I see the only person though right now. I don't see any behind you. There's none behind me. I know the only person right now who has physical photo paper is you, Jose. Right behind you. I see it. I recognize. Oh my God! I forgot the name of the company. Holy crap! What's the paper?
Ilford.
Yeah, kept thinking Ingram. Anyway, but yeah. I see. I mean, what I'm going to see. What for me, I think it's going to be starting. These companies are going to either start. You've already seen a bunch of them buy each other out, but they're basically. It's just going to be an evolution of so there'll be Instagram meets Snapchat meets Twitter. There'll be it's just literally going to be. I mean, that's kind of what everything's been kind of since Facebook or since MySpace really. I mean, it's just been one after another, kind of taking a little bit of one and a little bit another, and kind of combining it. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out Snapchat myself. I've had my 15-year-old sister try to explain it to me, and I can't. But I mean, the biggest thing I'm trying to figure out is supposedly New York Times is on Snapchat, and I'm trying to figure out what do they do there. But
well, I mean, what I've seen is it's you take what works. Yeah. From these other social media sites, and then you break it out into its own application. So Instagram was just the photo aspect, the photo sharing of Facebook. Twitter was just the sharing aspect of Facebook. So, I mean, I could see another social media sort of phenomenon growing from a, aspect of another social media site and then becoming its own thing, because people tend to want to specialize in every little thing. There's been a lot of talk. I don't know if anybody listens to Serial or listens to these other podcasts from, for instance, Gimlet Media. But some of the things they talk about with regard, at least to podcasting, is where you can have sort of this network or this shareable capability of podcasts. So let's say somebody wants to spread the word about Around the Lens, they can pull out, a segment of audio and share that. So I think you're going to see more fragmentation, especially as other sites sort of grow and develop and have to acquiesce to, I would say, investor demands. You're going to see them changing, and then other social media sites sort of filling in the gap, or coming in to replace what they would have done, or maybe do it differently.
Yeah. The big thing that I'm hoping for, and what I'm continually looking for, is where is the news organization that's going to start the next Snapchat, the next Facebook, the next whatever, because it's great and all that, I would say 85%, 95% of the conversation I hear from news organizations, people who work in the media, are how can I use X app, X program to do my work? No one is talking about how can I basically how can we create a platform so that people actually go there for news media, as opposed to Facebook, like the Facebook oh God, what is it called? Basically the Facebook exclusive articles. I still have yet to see, like, I've started going through looking for the application process because there's a couple different sites that I work for. I'm a Facebook verified person for some unknown reason. And I don't understand how this is the future, this can possibly be a sustainable future of journalism. Because the only people making money on this, we may get a ton of attention, but the only people making money on either Facebook videos or hell, even YouTube videos are YouTube and Facebook. And I don't know any news organization making bank on YouTube. I mean, even Vice, which gets 500,000 hits. I mean, they're talking about maybe making, you work out those numbers, and they're maybe making $150 on a 12-minute piece where they went to the freaking Ukraine and got shot at, and then I mean, like, this is not sustainable in any way, shape, and form. And now all we have, we're going, oh well, how do we fund it? Well, we have to have nonprofits, or you have to have hopefully Buffett will come and buy us, or Bloomberg will buy us, or some venture capital thing will come up. But there's not an app that's specifically for news that will pay for news, and that, like, venture capitalists or somebody is going to magically come in and give us Twitter or Facebook money. You know what I mean? Twitter or Facebook has what, $25 billion just sitting around. Apple has that. Apple has what, 200 or something like that. And where's that for the news media? Like, who can possibly create that? And I guess that's the conversation I wish that everyone from the NPPA to individual journalists was having. And the problem is I don't see anybody having that conversation.
Yeah.
We're all too busy trying to make ends meet, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, it's tough. Money is always going to be a factor. I remember, I mean, it's similar like Kickstarter or Patreon, or where I heard about this years ago, where you can fund individual stories that you want to see reported on. I think there was a website associated
Beacon?
with that.
I think it's Beacon. A couple of my friends use it. I donate through a lot of people. I've donated to do a bunch of stories like that. I mean, the problem again, it's unless you have, one of the problems is that I find as a person who often does adversarial journalism, where you're going after, you're not just doing like a story about something, and it's not just kind of the general, like, local news journalism. When you're actually attacking somebody or trying to dig up evidence against them and everything like that, it's very, very difficult to sustainably do that type of journalism. I mean, like, I constantly think about this in my own work, in my own social media posts or whatever. I make the decision, and I'm like, okay, well, I know so much about Hillary Clinton's background. I know so much about her dirty dealings and things like that. I have a very low opinion of her. How much of that do I write about? How much of that do I talk about? Because I know that when I try to do a Kickstarter or whatever, the Democratic base and the kind of that voter base is a huge amount of my donation base when I'm trying to write a story, say, about, I'm trying to go out and cover Donald Trump and or something like that. And so if I speak poorly about her voter base, there's no way they're going to give me money. And that's one of the huge problems with nonprofit journalism, is that you have places like NPR, you have all these places, they can't do stories about Shell Oil, because Shell is one of the #1 donors to that thing. You've seen that with Koch brothers have nixed documentaries about the Koch brothers at local PBS stations because they're the #1 donor to PBS. Not any liberals or progressives, supposedly. It is the Koch brothers who are the #1 donors to the liberal, PBS network. And that's why I feel like the only way future for us to actually kind of continue doing good journalism is that we have to figure out how to make money. Just purely make money, get people to subscribe to us, get people to whatever, which is one of the big reasons I have, like, I have a love-hate relationship with Reddit, is that they expect everything under the planet for free,
Yeah.
and don't expect to pay anything. You know, they're like, oh well, you know, Hollywood makes billions of dollars. I can download the Avengers. And it's like, well, that's not how that works. But anyway.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. I definitely see where you're coming from. Definitely with like, it's not like the news isn't interesting. You know, the stories that are coming out, they're all really interesting. People take a long time to make the work, make the stories, the documentaries as well. And it's like
Yeah.
almost then you have people like Kim Kardashian just taking all the fucking news, and you're just like, what the hell is
Yeah.
going on, man?
Yeah, yeah.
Who cares if she's naked? Like, do you know like this is happening over here? And like, come on, really, guys.
Sounds like to me what we have to do is we have to make a sex tape.
and Stu
I'm just
Gawker.
saying, we gotta do what we gotta do.
Hey, if we
Or
can
or
get-
marry Kanye.
I mean,
Or
the
maybe-
problem is if you've been to many press scrums lately, look around and see how many of those people that you'd want to see on a sex tape. There's not too many. I don't know too many photojournalists that I'd want to see there. Nope.
Zach, if you thought about marrying Kanye,
My mom always said that I needed to marry rich. I've yet to find that though. Find that woman though. So
definitely, or guy. Hey, you know, it's all good. Anyways, let's move on to our next topic of the week. Gear Talk, as I like to call it, is a segment where we talk about the latest and greatest gear out there, and then wax on about it, and then eventually devolve into talking about Canon or Nikon. But before we do that, let's talk about the gear that we're going to talk about, which is actually pretty neat, and it can be used by anybody who has a camera. It's from a company called, I guess, Syrup. They created this thing called the Genie Mini, which actually is pretty neat. It's a circular sort of, it's like a hockey puck, if you will, that you put onto the bottom of your camera, and then you put onto a tripod, and it really enhances time lapse. So if you shoot any time lapse, or even video, if you just shoot video that rotates, what it does is it allows you to shoot time lapse that's moving. So, you know, I've shot time lapse before, but it's always been static time lapse. So if you want a way to kind of, you know, make your time lapse a little bit more interesting, you can buy this thing, put it on there, set it up to rotate for however long you want to rotate, and then at the end you get this nice, cool rotating time lapse shot. So I thought it was pretty neat. Go on to the wet link I put in the show notes. Check out the video. They do a pretty good job of convincing you to essentially buy one, although they're about like $200 and something. So I don't know how economically feasible it is for me to buy one right now. But you know, they use it in all very interesting ways. They tie it together with their track system that allows for time lapse rotating also on a track. So you can really get some different creative viewpoints with this. So, you know, what do you guys think of this tool? You know, obviously something, you know, is it something you want to add to your toolkit of, you know, documentary, you know, visual journalism? And what do you think of time lapse in general, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera? So what do you guys think? Throw that out there.
I think it's a pretty nifty little device. I think it's a little bit too much out of my price range though for the thing it does. But I mean, the ideas you can get with it is pretty cool. You know, like I saw an example was in an alleyway, and you just pan around and time lapse across, and there's lots of motion happening. You can get the obvious sunrise, sunset, which is pretty cool. But I mean, again, maybe if it got a little bit more affordable for me.
Yeah, same here. I'm trying to. I just like I've seen simpler versions of these things set up. It didn't have a sync cable necessarily with it, but I mean essentially it's an egg timer with a tripod mount. Which isn't, you know, I mean, obviously there's a heck of a lot more going on there, but I just feel like, I mean, one of the problems is that with any of this stuff is that the first couple generations you pay for the tech, and then after that, you know, it's cheap. I mean, the only usually that's the way it always works, except for maybe GoPro, where it actually gets more expensive as it goes on and doesn't really change and doesn't really get better. But which, by the way, GoPro I guess won't be sponsoring us now. But I've tried when I lived in Alaska. I tried so many times to do time lapse and failed so completely miserably. Um, so the people
So,
that can do
why
it,
did you fail at that, Zach?
I don't know. I could just never get anything right with it. I think it was just one of those. I didn't do enough planning, and I mean, and obviously, I'll blame a little bit of the fact that every time I tried to do it, I was always trying to catch aurora. So it also meant that it was usually negative 25 degrees outside. So sitting out there and trying to work out camera settings and getting a second chance at doing anything wasn't really something that I was going to do. So yeah, it's just I just haven't invested the time and effort into it. I'll blame that on a heck of a lot more on than anything else. I mean, I always had the gear. The D7000 was really fantastic for it had all the time lapse stuff built in, and so it was just literally just me not knowing the technical stuff and spending the time. But it was one of those. It's something I'd still like to play with, and this would be cool. Again, give it to me at $120. It's a deal.
Sold.
Sold!
So American. Yeah.
Well, you know what, Zach? Maybe a Chinese company will rip off their idea.
I'm sure that
You can
they
buy
already
it
have it
$40.
online and it's available on the Amazon store
And then you'll
somewhere.
buy it, and then you'll deride the fact that American industry is moving towards China.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Nikon or Canon to come out with a camera in the United States. Like that's one thing I find amusing. I've never once heard anyone ever talk about, what I really want is I want a camera that's made in the United States. I literally I worked at B&H, I worked at Adorama, never once heard that conversation.
Are there
all they care
cameras that
about
are
was
made in the United States?
made in
Is there a
Japan,
camera that's
in
made?
Japan.
In the
Not
Argus.
that I know.
Was it Argus? I mean,
Oh well.
it's old school though. Yeah.
I mean, I made an oatmeal pin box for pinhole box.
American, but that's good.
Maybe if Trump's elected president, we'll have cameras made in the United States in the next 4 years.
Call them Trump cameers. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
right. Well, he's going to have it made in
orange
Japan
tinge
or
to it.
China.
Yeah.
You were talking about a cheaper rotation thing. I was just looking at B&H Photo. There's a thing called Drift Time Lapse. It's $16, and apparently it's battery operated, and it'll rotate for like an hour or something like that. So
That's a price point I can do. You didn't see that?
Yeah. I'm a lot more interested in the sliders. That I've seen a couple. I follow a couple of those companies on Instagram and other places, which is also an interesting fact to me. A lot of ways that I find actually about gear now is actually through Instagram, to kind of tie it back to our social media segment we were talking about. There's not only because of so many people getting sponsorships and kind of showing off gear on their Instagram feed, but also like the branding, which is another thing that I guess that there's a bunch of articles that I kind of saw pass by talking about how if Instagram changes their feed, it's going to kill any brands being able to work on Instagram, which will be interesting because everybody from Think Tank to those sliders that I was talking about, they have huge Instagram feeds, and they constantly talk about Aquatech is actually quite amazing. They do they showcase a lot of amazing photography and kind of people using the gear, which always makes me want to get into that. But again, I have to move somewhere where the water is a little bit warmer. Lake Ontario isn't exactly pleasant.
There you go. How about you, Jose? Have you ever worked with any time lapse in any of your work?
Me personally, no. I had a couple buddies that back when we used to all skateboard, and we'd do a few time lapses with just like kind of do like it's like a fill in between parts and whatnot. So I have a rough idea of how it works and how to do it. But me personally, no, I've not yet dove into the time lapse world. I feel like I'd be really addicted into it though.
I mean, it's pretty neat. I messed with time lapse on a couple of different occasions. When I was with the Air National Guard, I did a time lapse of a building construction. and I actually had them build like a housing for the camera, because the camera sat outside for over, I would say, 6 months, and it sat in this little housing with a little window that overlooked the construction site, and it recorded, I think, a photo a minute for, oh man, like at least 6 months. And what I realized was you don't need a photo a minute if you're recording over 6 months. Like a photo every hour would probably be adequate. Because when
That's
you're
actually,
doing a photo a minute, you're talking about like a long time lapse, and nobody wants to watch that.
Yeah.
But it was interesting though, because I mean, I set it on program mode because I didn't want to deal with exposure variation. And I mean, if you shoot it on program with time lapse, it'll like automatically adjust for the right exposure. So you're if you shoot it, if a manual, you're going to have these highs and lows based on obviously the sun and the darkness. So I just let it on program, and I let it do a photo a minute, and it was pretty neat because it was in New York, so you'd see the snow, and you'd see the sun, and you'd see the darkness, and you'd see the snowfall and rise and whatnot, and that was pretty neat. But yeah, again, I was left with a lot of footage, and in the end, I could have done it really, again, like a photo an hour would have been fine. And I actually used I started with the intervalometer that's built into the Nikon cameras, because I think that's a neat feature that actually I wish Canon would adopt, that they don't. You need an external controller to do any time lapse.
Canon doesn't have that, really?
No,
Really?
at least not in the Canon 5D Mark II that I use. Maybe they have it in more consumer-friendly cameras or prosumer cameras. I don't know. But they didn't have it built in like Nikon does. Like Nikon builds in the intervalometer, which is a really neat feature. But you can only shoot up to 999 frames on a Nikon. So I had actually purchased an external intervalometer, which allowed me to shoot, for as long as I wanted, which I needed to do because I only checked on the camera every like once a month. I put like I think a 64 gigabyte card inside of it, and again I shot on the lowest JPEG setting because ultimately I was exporting to video. All I cared about was like a 1080p video, so I didn't care. I didn't need like a 16 or 20 megapixel image. I needed just.
That's something I learned about the hard way the first time I did a time lapse. I just I was like I wanted as high quality as possible, so I shot RAW.
Oh no!
It was like I literally like opened it up in Lightroom and like it just crashed.
Yeah, I was
Opened it up again and tried to process everything out, and then I figured out that you had to use it in what was that? I forget what I was using, Premiere or Final Cut back then. But then I'm like, oh, you do it this way or whatever, and it's like a 64 gig block of files for like a 2-minute video, and it's just like the quality was like 84 gigs or something like, or the amount was like 84 gigs. It was ridiculous. And then it was like every time I tried it, I kept going down farther and farther, and then I realized that the time thing. What was it when I drove from Anchorage, Alaska to Syracuse, New York? I did a time lapse. I had on my GoPro, and obviously you have different settings or whatever. And I was like, oh, once every 5 seconds. That was ridiculous. I was like, well, I'm driving 55 miles per hour, so it'll be fast or whatever. I tried to figure out math in my head, which is not something that. Something that photographers should be really good at, but something I'm not really good at. And again, like the first 2 days, it was just ridiculous. I was going through, I was like, wait, I ran out of card space because, the GoPros aren't really amazing at warning you that you're running out of thing or anything's going on whatsoever.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, great, I ran out of card space like an hour and a half into this trip. Man. And I'm like, great, okay, great. I guess I didn't need to have those the wolves that ran across the road or the moose or whatever that happened, and like, oh yeah, it was bad. I figured it out by the time I hit like Alberta though. So.
Yeah, ever since then I've been playing with time lapse a little bit. And honestly, if you're interested in time lapse, really get a GoPro. Yeah. Because those cameras are great at it, and if you're doing time lapse, you're most likely doing it for video. So you can shoot 4K video with the most recent GoPro 4 and devote that to time lapse, and it does great time lapse, and it also does it like automatically. So And that's what happened with a recent update of the GoPro. If you shoot time lapse with it, so in the past you got like a bunch of individual 12 megapixel stills, but with the most recent update, what they do is you choose like what quality time lapse you want. So for instance, I choose like a 4K time lapse. And what that'll do is it'll do the same thing it did before. It'll shoot a frame every second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, a minute, whatever you want. And then at the end of it, it'll just create a singular 4K video file.
Oh, that's nice.
I mean, if you ever want to grab a still from that, you can, but at the end of the day, you now have something you can immediately work with in Premiere or whatever you use for video editing.
Yeah.
It wasn't that hard to do with time lapse. I remember when I first started doing time lapse, I like tried to do it manually, so I like messed with the settings, and then I realized Premiere actually had like a checkbox you can do when you import photos, which will import as a sequence and then create that as a video file. And I was like, oh, well, that would have saved me hours when I was doing time lapse before. Now that I know about it, but the only time I've messed with time lapse recently has been with the GoPro, and again, it's such a great camera to have in your kit. You throw that in there, and for instance, I was doing a photo shoot at a place, and or video or whatever. I can set the GoPro in a corner of the room and have it do time lapse, and I can go out and do something else, and come back like 15 minutes later, or however long I want, and now I have time lapse from that camera. Whereas instead of devoting a DSLR or some little higher end camera to that, and like I said before, having to buy an external device to control the intervalometer of the camera, just don't mess with that. Just get a GoPro. You're good.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna actually, I just purchased a device which for very cheap allows you to do like rotating, simple rotations. So I'm gonna mess with that, and I'll talk about it whenever I get it and get a chance to use it. So, rotating time lapse.
I finally figured out the name of this film that I was thinking of. Recommend anyone interested in, again, good documentaries, but also interested in time lapse. There's a film called Chasing Ice, which if anyone remembers a couple years ago, there was this amazing footage of basically massive amounts of glaciers cleaving off of, I believe it was either, I don't think it was the Antarctic or I forget where it was, but it was from the film Chasing Ice, and they set up all these time-lapse cameras near like 7 or 8 different glaciers around the world. I think 2 in Alaska, 1 down in South America, Antarctica, whatever, and we're able to use with a couple cameras set up on time-lapse to show within like a year how much they receded and how much they changed and how quickly climate change was doing it. But the cool camera technical end of it is that they go into a lot of how they actually made it to get to work, because they had to deal with the battery issue of it being super cold, the fact that they were leaving these cameras there alone for like a year, and that they would only be able to, some of the locations were so remote that they would only be able to get back to it at the end of the project. So they literally only knew that they would be able to do it. So I mean, it's super stressful. I mean, almost all of them worked to some level, whatever. And they had like one of the photographers had to try it again or whatever. I got to actually talk to one of the photographers once, the guy that did it, and he's one of those amazing, ridiculous environmental photographers that you're like, I don't have the patience to do. He's like the type of guy that will like stay in one spot on a frozen beach somewhere to get one photo of this bird or whatever for 2 years. The other one is the Cove, which if anyone's a super gearhead, the Cove is probably one of the best documentaries you could possibly watch. It's about the Cove in Japan where they do this mass slaughter of dolphins. You might want to fast forward through that part. They give you a really big warning before they start showing it. But the amount of subterfuge and kind of illegal activity that they went in, they got a hold of people from Skywalker, basically Skywalker. I forget what Skywalker Sound, and then the prop masters that worked on Star Wars and all these different things to make rocks to basically create things that they could put cameras with time lapse in them, and then be able to have cameras shoot down and expose and film in this cove. They had to do like basically they got like military people to advise them. I mean, it's completely insane, fun film about a horrible, horrible subject, but highly, highly recommended.
All right, great.
Cool.
I'm gonna check that out right now.
Maybe dinner and watch that.
Oh, I don't know if you want it. No, don't watch Chasing Ice on and dinner. Don't watch. Get a bottle of good whiskey and watch The Cove, because it makes Blackfish a happy-go-lucky film on the level of a romantic comedy. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, it's bad. I mean, it's good, but it's like tears. Yeah.
What was it called again? The Cove?
The Cove and Chasing Ice are the two films I'd recommend.
All right, great. We'll check that out. We'll have a little watch the movies, and next week we can talk about them like a little movie club.
Everybody comes back like red eyes. We're like, what did you do to me, Zach?
Fish.
What the hell?
Awesome. All right. Well, let's wrap up this week's show with our picks of the week. So as usual, let's throw it to the panelists first. Panelists, what do you have for us for your pick of the week?
So today I was looking on the Lens blog. There's a cool little photo story called "The Pressure of the Sierra Madre." It's basically portraits of Rama Muri. It's like a bunch of people indigenous people that live in the Chihuahua state in Mexico, and they stayed in working with the cartels. And photographer Christian Rodriguez goes there and takes a few photos and portraits of them, and you get to see how they live and whatnot. It's pretty cool. Definitely stumble on to the Lens blog and check that out.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm just looking at some photographs now, and this is very beautiful. All right, Zach, what do you got for us?
Gorgeous. That was it. Also, amusingly, was one of my picks of the week. I always pick out a couple, but I highly recommend that. That story is absolutely gorgeous. Amazing portraits, amazing photos, but. I usually don't pick gear, like weird gear stuff. We've had past panelists who pick, pairs of pants and stuff like that, which I love, mind you. That is awesome. I actually got one of those pairs of pants that they recommended. But so here's my laptop, and you'll notice on the back of it is my hard drive is attached to the back of it. Which, if anyone works, mobily, that's a really big problem. Is where do you put your hard drive? Is it falling off the desk or whatever? So what I got is, on the back of it, is double-sided Velcro. Super simple. It's on the back of it, and it attaches, and boom. Since my laptop has bleeding 128 gigs on it, because I guess that's where Apple thinks that, oh yeah, everybody's just got stuff in the cloud, it's perfectly fine. I always have to carry around a hard drive since I do video editing on the fly and everything like that. And I've been doing that for the past couple of years, and it's always great because if anything else, it always starts conversations because people walk by and go, "What the heck is going on here?" We're like, "Is that magnets?" That's always the first question: is magnets? And I'm like, "Yeah, that seems like a really good idea. Yeah, let's throw some magnets in your hard drives." But yeah, super Velcro. You can get them on Amazon for I got them right here. Just bought them again. They're like $4.99. And
what are you going to do with all that other Velcro? Since
I use Velcro for a lot of things, actually. On my desk, I have the USB breakout box where there's like 8 USB plugs. That's Velcro to my desk. If I want something to stay in one spot, I Velcro it there. Yeah, I'm a little obsessive about Velcro once I figured it out. I've got all those Velcro wraps for cables and everything like that.
Yeah, yep. Nice. All right, double-sided Velcro. That's
Don't buy the cheap stuff too. You got to buy actual Velcro, branded Velcro. None of the knockoff stuff.
No. Oh. All right, Velcro branded Velcro. Got it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
My pick of the week is I mentioned this earlier. In honor of St. Patty's Day, I'm wearing some green. I don't know what your sports affiliation is. I don't really care about Boston, but it's green. But anyways, in honor of St. Patty's Day, there was a photographer who did some cool stuff with his 6-month-old son and positioning him as a leprechaun. So I thought that was pretty neat. Just because St. Patty's Day, gotta do something for it. I'm a Murphy. I gotta recognize the Irish. So go check that out. Really cool stuff, and just it's a neat to see what you can do. He does lots of stuff with Photoshop and his kids. So in terms of just not really visual journalism as like we sort of talk about it, but it's just a neat sort of like way to get your mind thinking about photography and stuff. If you're doing things on a subject, it's a great sort of I would say palate cleanser. So go check that out. Again, for St. Patty's Day and all that good stuff. So that's my pick of the week. All right, let's go on with the plugs. Jose, where can people learn more about you?
You can find me on MySpace and no.
Bringing MySpace back. Wow.
You can follow me on Instagram. That'd be cool. Give me some more followers.
Not familiar with Instagram.
I know.
Go ahead. How can people reach you on Instagram?
It's just at my name, so Jose Alvarado, JOSEALVARADO, and you can also check out my website, just mynamephotos.com, and yeah, send me an email, tell me hey, what's up. I like talking to people, learning about people. Yeah.
Are you on Reddit? You're on Reddit as Jose Alvarado, right?
I'm on Reddit as the Milkman.
The Milkman, that's right.
You're exposing your Reddit name, really? I've got like 3 Reddit names and no one knows any of them. So
I know what you use those Reddit names for.
No. I just have arguments with myself back and forth. Build Reddit points,
Yeah, I don't troll in the name, so it's fine.
Yeah.
The Milkman. All right, Jose Alvarado. Good. Zach, where can we reach you at?
As always, zdroberts.com, zdroberts on Facebook, zdroberts on Twitter, and shockingly, zdroberts on Instagram. Not on MySpace yet, I don't think. Maybe I still have an account there, maybe.
No one has an account on MySpace. Come on. And you can reach me at all things DJM Photo, but of course I want to promote and you can always reach me or Zach on AroundTheLens.com. It's a continuously developing website. All the episodes we've featured so far are on there, and we're developing a whole bunch of different initiatives and programs to make Around the Lens not just a repository for episodes of this show, but also a place where you can go to connect with the panelists you've heard about or seen on the show, and just basic stories and news related to the world of visual journalism. There's all kinds of things going on in our field, and you see bits and pieces of it on these other websites like Petapixel and the Photo Brigade and F-Stoppers and whatnot. But in terms of being one central location for all things related to visual journalism, that's what I want to make AroundTheLens.com into at some point. So go back there. We're going to have, again, the episodes, but also additional stuff from our panelists about what they think is interesting and relevant to us in this field. So AroundTheLens.com, that's the place to go to. And then, of course, if you go there, you can link out to our Facebook page, our YouTube page, our Twitter page, all that good stuff. Please like, subscribe, follow, comment, stalk, whatever you need to do to ensure that we are the center of your universe, because that's all it's about with the internet and social media, the center of your universe. Anyways, that's it from me. I want to thank our panelists this week. Jose Alvarado, we really appreciate you coming on the show and taking time out of your day to do this. For Zach Roberts, I am David J. Murphy. And this has been Around the Lens, episode 17. Thank you all for listening, and good night. And we're out. In 5, 4, 3, 2, and we're out. Stop.